And welcome to the Aaron Katzman Show. I'm your host, Aaron Katz, and we speak to you about your life, your money, and your investments. And as always, we're coming to you from the spiritual and soon to be financial capital of the world, Jerusalem, Israel. If you like this content, please hit the like button below. And for some reason, if you've not yet done so, please subscribe to both the YouTube channel and to the podcast. And one more, and if you actually think somebody might find this of interest, there's a little button below which says share. You can click on that and send it on over to them, and they can be all the smarter for it. So, I want to speak about something. It doesn't often happen that I get on consecutive days meetings that, in one way or another, revolve around a similar topic. So, a couple of weeks ago, I had a couple of meetings, like I said, with people who received, each one had received an inheritance. And each one was being told by a certain loved one, either it was a child or children, or in the case of another one, it was good friends of theirs, that they should take that inheritance money and buy property. That is the only solution. And they came to me and, they wanted to know, well, should we buy property or not? And I said, well, not so fast. But before you commit to anything, why don't we run through your financial situation, as we are wont to do from time to time, and see what your story is. See if it makes sense for you to actually go ahead and buy the property. So the first person I spoke to was a woman who got an inheritance, and it turns out that her husband also had gotten a larger inheritance. So they were actually sitting on quite a bit of money, except for the fact that she was about to stop working. Her husband had stopped working. He was independent contractor. He had almost nothing in the way of a pension. So basically, they were getting a very little bit amount of money from the state, but they needed to really supplement their income. The first question I asked her, she said, "Oh, my friends are telling me, my friends are telling me that I should go ahead and buy a property." And I said, "Well, you're already in your 70s. Do you want?" I said, "Do you want to be a landlady?" That was the first question before we even get into it. Like, do you actually want to own a property and take responsibility for the property? She goes, "No, I don't have the personality for it. I'm not good at charging people rent. I'm not good at, I'm not so organized. I don't want people to call me up in the middle of the night because they have problems with their, with a pipe that burst. I don't want to deal with it." So I said, "Well, then why are you even entertaining the idea? Just because your friend said you should buy an apartment? You don't want to have anything to do with it." She goes, "I really don't. I just want to get, I want to get income coming in. We have enough money, but I want income coming in, and I want to be able to supplement whatever it is and then give money to our kids. That's my goal." So I said, "Well, why would you want to lock up like $700,000 into a property where you're going to end up getting, 2%, 3% income, and the money's gone, right? Because in a property, you're not going to do anything with it." So she goes, "Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense." So I said, "Okay." The next person I met with was a little bit more complicated. Why? Because also they were short on pension funds. And not just that, but they had gotten a much more modest inheritance. And it turns out that if they play the cards right, that we should be able to generate enough money from the inheritance and other investments they have to supplement the income that they need to live until 120 happily ever after. But they had a whole bunch of kids just badgering them. "Oh, you got to buy property. Net property in Israel is the best investment. It never goes down. You can only put 10% down, leverage 90%, come up with all that money in 3 or 4 years, and you're good to go." And I'm like, okay, let's hold on a second. Let's just say you don't do that because that's a dumb idea because then the money's not working for you at all. And then you're really up the creek, right? If you want to put, in the middle of some project which is being built right now, it's not going to be ready for another 3 or 4 years. That's not a good idea in your situation. But let's just run the numbers. How much do you think you can get if you put your money into a property? How much do you think you're going to get? So they said, I don't know, 6,000 shekels a month, 7,000 shekels a month. I said, wow, that's fantastic. I said, we went through their numbers, their expenses. How much are you short a month? Oh, about 13,000 shekels a month. So I said, you're going to take all of your money, you're going to put it into a property. You're going to now be short only 6,000 shekels a month in the best case scenario. And you've got no principal left because it's all stuck in bricks and mortar. And they go, yeah. I said, well, does that actually make sense to you? right? How's that going to work? How are you actually going to pay your bills if you don't have enough money coming in every month and all of your money is tied up in a property? How does that work exactly? So they thought about it, like, oh, that's interesting. I said, yeah, well, that's because it's not for you. It's not a good idea. It's a dumb. I think I actually used the word dumb idea for somebody who's in their 70s, to do this. For some people in their 70s, depending on their financial situation, it's a good idea. But people sometimes mean well, but they don't have all the information at hand, or they put themselves in your shoes. They say, well, I'm 32 years old, so if I had $750,000, I'd buy a property with it. Well, that's great, but you're in completely different situations, right? This person's going to need probably to tap a little bit of principal every now and then in order to make ends meet, let alone if, God forbid, something were to happen and they'd have to widen the doorway, widen the bathroom to make it wheelchair accessible. What are they going to do? They can't take out a saw and they go like this, saw and goes, here, Mr. Whoever, Mr. Builder, who's widening my bathroom. Here, why don't you take a bedroom in my apartment that I bought and I'm renting out for 6,000 shekels a month because my children told me to do so? Something tells me he's not going to do that. It doesn't work that way. You need cash. You need liquidity. Liquidity is incredibly important. It's even more important as we age because we're going to have unforeseen expenses, generally medical, healthcare like. And sometimes you need to have access to chunks of money, large chunks of money, and you need that immediate. You don't have time. You're not going to know, oh, I can always sell the apartment. It shouldn't be too easy. I'll get my money out of it. I'm like, yeah, but it takes 5 months to sell your 3 months to sell your apartment. You need the money tomorrow. You need the money yesterday. It just doesn't make sense to me. Okay, like I said, I don't even know if people mean well. I don't know. People like to throw advice unsolicited, and they think they're trying to help, but it just doesn't always work out that way. In order to make these decisions, you have to understand what your financial situation is, right? It might sound good, and what sounds good for your kid isn't necessarily good for you, as I said. Whatever is an investment which is good for a 35-year-old isn't necessarily a good investment for a 75-year-old on fixed income who doesn't have enough money to make ends meet. Just to throw that little caveat in. But for the 35-year-old, yeah, maybe they should buy property, right? If they don't have any debt, they've got, their emergency fund, they've got some investments, they've got enough to put down for a nice down payment. Yeah, maybe property makes sense. You have to weigh the pluses and the minuses like you always have to do. But for that to be the default, well, I got an inheritance, you got to put your money into property. Well, that's stupid. It doesn't help. In fact, it can cause a lot of damage. I've seen so many people, especially here in Israel. For those of you who are not living in Israel outside, something you should know is that property prices here are extremely high. And most people, the significant amount of their net worth is tied up into a home. So I know somebody came to me, I don't know, 10 years ago. And this is something that actually occurs all the time, but this one just, as I'm free associating right now, comes to mind. But they had a home at that point which was worth around $2.5 million. And they were making a wedding for one of their kids. And they needed to come up with, I don't know, $40,000 all in, maybe $50,000 to help set up the kids and the wedding and whatever, all the trappings. And he said, well, I got to go to the bank and take out a loan. I'm like, you got to take out a loan? He goes, yeah, well, everything that we have nothing liquid. We have nothing in the bank. We live month to month, but because all of our money we put into this house, which is worth $2.5 million with a big mortgage, which they barely pay every month. So that's a little nutty, right? They can't afford to do anything because their entire net worth is tied up in their home. Fortunately, in Israel, people have very, very nice net worths because of that. Unfortunately, they have zero money in the bank. They have no liquidity, and that's something which is really common. Now, you come into an inheritance, you don't have to have that situation, right? You're now in charge. You can create your financial situation. And that's what's important. Whenever you make these decisions, you have to sit down and see, what are my goals? What are my needs? Needs. Not what are my kids' goals and needs. What are my needs? If I was an independent contractor, I never put money away for pension, I'm getting a measly state pension, maybe a little bit of U.S. Social Security, and that's it. And I still have kids at home, and I've got a wife, and we're in good health, and we're going to live a long time. Well, how are we going to make ends meet? So it probably behooves you to sit with a financial professional, and they can help walk you through. See, maybe it does make sense to purchase a property. I'm not against rental properties. As you know, I'm all for investing, as long as it's a normal investment, right? To buy solar panels in the Arctic is probably not a good idea. Okay, but if you invest in quality stocks, index funds, non-levered real estate, chances are that's probably pretty good. That's how you grow your wealth. That's how you grow your net worth. That's fantastic. But it has to be able to fit what you have and what your situation is in life, okay? So think about it. Don't just think automatically, I got an inheritance, I'm buying property. Because that might be good for your neighbor or for your neighbor's kid, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's good for you. It doesn't necessarily mean it's not good for you, but you got to sit down and really run through all the numbers. And even before that, you got to figure out, well, do I want to actually, like that question I asked the lady, do you want to be a landlord? Because if you don't want to be a landlord, that pretty much opens and shuts the case, right? You just answered your own question. Maybe I shouldn't buy a property because I just don't want to deal with it. It's hard work. You've been tuning into the Aaron Katzman Show. We speak about your life, money, and your investments. If you like this content, please hit the like button below. If you've not yet done so, please subscribe to both the podcast and to the YouTube channel. And if you know somebody who got an inheritance, or you're a kid whose parents got an inheritance and you think you know what you're going to tell them the great advice, why don't you click the share button below and send it to them as well. Thanks very much for tuning in. We'll speak to you soon.